Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here to celebrate our second anniversary of the Mahoosuc Way. So my first question to you is, where were you 50 years ago when my small hometown in Florida could have used this? It could use the brilliance and expertise that came ahead of the hordes of people that changed my hometown forever, that has made it all of the things this group has worked so diligently and continues to piece together to avoid. So you're 50 years too late for my town, but we're just in time for Bethel. So I'm so glad that you came to here today to see 2 years out. What have we accomplished? Do you remember those mazillion sticky notes that were all over the Bethel Inn Conference Center of all the ideas and all of the plans and all of the hopes? Well, the purpose of today is to say some of them are underway. Some people in our group have worked extraordinarily hard and have persevered and have launched the Mahoosuc Way despite, I don't know, COVID, despite having an influx of new people here who we weren't even counting on when we started it. Bethel was not Bethel area with capital letters like it is today. So despite strong headwinds, tremendous progress has been made. And so all of you should just step back and say, yippee, we're there. We're leading the pack. We've had great leadership. We've had incredible insights. And so tonight's celebration. So now's the time to get your pen and pencil, grab your popcorn, get your drink. We're going to get into the meeting today, but there is a bit of housekeeping before we do. So please stay muted throughout the whole presentation until question and answers come. And actually, questions and answers, if you have any, please enter them to chat. We'll get to as many as we can during the time we have. We're hoping to have some follow-up with questions that aren't answered. We'll just see how it goes. Since we are not going to take time to introduce all 90 plus people who are registered, if you can right-click on your name and put your full name in, and if you're associated with any organization, pop that in too. So it's our informal getting to know you kind of dance. So with that, I think we're ready to get going. So enjoy the time, think hard, and stay involved.
Thank you, Barbara. So we're going to kick things off tonight by premiering a video that several of us have been working on, which not only captures the beautiful landscape of our region, but highlights the many community voices to describe why and how the Mahoosuc Way pledge to embrace our place can work to benefit residents, maintain our natural resources, and help bring visitors into the fold respectfully and sustainably. This full-length video and several shorter videos to come were funded by a grant from the Maine Office of Tourism and several stakeholders who have been part of these efforts from the beginning, such as the Northern Forest Center, Sunday River, the Maine Mineral and Gem Museum, Bethel Area Chamber of Commerce, and many more helped to shape the video that you're about to see. We hope you enjoy it.
The Mahoosuc Way it's kind of a play on words. It's both a way of orienting ourselves to the area and thinking about the principles that we should be upholding as we explore the outdoor recreation options in this area. It's a new way of thinking about what it means to be a visitor and a tourist. We call it the Mahoosuc Way because we want to demonstrate the way that we do things around here, respecting the land and making sure that you get to really know the place that you are visiting. And we really want to encourage that.
I think if everyone can focus on what they love about this area and what brought them here in the first place, whether it's outdoor activities or the great people.
The best thing about this area is that there is so much to do, and make time to try it all. Enjoy the area, help us take care of it, so it lasts for generations.
And talk to people and ask questions, get recommendations, and stay a little while. And then come back. There's so many layers here, and I think it will take a few times for you to come back and revisit and get to know us a little bit more.
Tourism for outdoor recreation is a growing sector in this region, and there was an opportunity to get ahead of the curve. The Mahoosuc Way is really an opportunity for the community to decide how to take the benefits of the tourism industry, figuring out for itself what the balance is between encouraging tourism growth and maintaining a really solid community and having tourism benefit the community and vice versa, rather than just be kind of impacted by tourism.
I grew up in Harrison, which was a tourist town. I just loved the day in the spring when the tourists started to come. It brought life, it brought better economy, and it brought people that we made lifetime relationships with. And I think this Mahoosuc Way brings the towns together so that we can have a say in how the change comes.
And that's one of the parts about the Mahoosuc Way is, yes, we're focusing on how our visitors and our residents use our natural resources, use our trails, our swimming holes, our mountains, our rivers, whatever. But also, Mahoosuc Way is also thinking about the people who live and work here. How do we make certain that we can all still afford to live here, that our schools can support our kids, that people don't have to move away to get good jobs? So while it sounds as though in some of its iterations that we really are focusing on only the visitors, we really are focusing on the entire greater Bethel area to make it great for all of us.
In New England specifically, we're fortunate to have a tradition of public access to private land. If you're not from the area and you come to visit, you might think you're entering a vast wilderness, but that's really not the case. We have a lot of managed forests that people are out on regularly and monitor, and I think it's kind of incumbent on all of us to take the responsibility to ensure people continue to have access to the land.
We are aware of climate change and we want to be leaders and respectful of our environment. We are developing this new eco-friendly wax called Green Ice Wax, and it's one of the ways that we feel like we're leading by example and showing our customers that we can make small changes that will help affect the climate in positive ways.
We have a lot of trails that are well loved to the point where the trails are kind of getting damaged. So by exploring as many new things as possible, we can keep people spread out and kind of keep these trails and these habitats a little safer.
My practices here at the Land Trust must reflect the values of the greater community, whether that is sustainable local forestry practices or that I'm mindful of how I'm walking my dog or using a trail. But I think its bigger focus is to get that communication going. And this is a great way for them to say, I'm going to take the pledge too, because I see the value here. And I think once we get that conversation open, all kinds of magic can happen. And the pledge is a great way to start. To show your appreciation, Mahoosuc Way has developed a great list of things that you can do to show you care.
Exploring wisely here in the community forest, I think looks like a couple different things, but I think the first step would be to do your best to do your homework. Reading about where you're gonna go beforehand, checking the weather forecast. Those are a couple steps you can take just to make sure you're gonna have a good day.
Part of showing respect is not only to the trail itself, but to all the other visitors while you're there. Just kind of be mindful of the fact that you're not the only ones out here.
Cultivating community is really encouraging people to get to know the community in a deeper way when they come to visit. And it'll be rewarding for you as a traveler, as a visitor.
If we really are going to address climate change, we need to get everybody on board. The more diversity there is in terms of people that have an outdoor experience and feel a connection to it and care about the environment and protecting Mother Earth, then it's just going to make it easier for us to address the big climate change problems we have coming in the future.
In terms of honoring the land, I think taking personal responsibility, whether you're a visitor or longtime resident here, just being aware of your impact when you are going out to recreate, just being responsible in your actions.
The overall message of the Mahoosuc Way is we can maintain community. We can maintain and build a place that really works for all kinds of people to live in, to work in, to be community members in, to be participants, while also continuing to nurture and encourage visitation to the place. That's a huge piece of the economy here, and to really be able to shape it as an economic driver that is productive and that is healthy and is helping and is integrated with the community and not separate from it.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in making that video, the interviewees, the funders, largely Maine Office of Tourism and their enterprise grant, and the guys who made it, Paul Friedman and Spencer Mandel of Maine Mountain Media. It's been months in the making, and I really hope you enjoyed it. There will be posts of that video on our YouTube page for the Bethel Area Chamber. And of course, you'll see it on social media and our newsletters. And as you could probably guess, they have a lot more content to come. And so we'll see other short videos coming up from all those many interviews and all that great footage they got of this area. So hope you enjoyed that. I can imagine that we'd have a round of applause if we were actually in a room together. So anyway, please feel free to share that once you see that floating around various social media. Moving along, if we had all day, we would go into the Mahoosuc Way Sustainable Tourism Initiative report sent out earlier by Isabella Ronson of Northern Forest Center. If you haven't gotten that, I'm happy to get that into your hands. I printed out the old-fashioned way, but I wanted to remind you to take a look at that because it highlights some snapshots of stories representing the Mahoosuc Way over the past 2 years. So now we'll take a few minutes to highlight 3 of what we call our pillars or core areas of focus. And our 3 that we'll focus on today will be community and visitor engagement, starting with Amy Halstead, who has been a participant all along the way. Cora Saul will give some updates about some local workforce development initiatives. And I think we'll hear from Vern Maxfield. I don't see him on our list yet, so we may need to pivot there, but about regional collaboration. So I will now, if you're ready, Amy Halstead, please take it away.
Thank you, Jesse. Hello, everyone. So great to see so many people here. When Barbara Murphy was getting us kicked off, she talked about, how we had our summit and then we had a global pandemic hit. What was interesting about that was that within 4 weeks, a group of us said, a global pandemic is not going to stop us from doing this work. So a group of us met socially distanced on the common outside the Bethel Inn and started the foundation of the pledge. So the pledge to embrace our place. And I think we're going to bring that up. I think, Isabella, you are going to actually just link us. So if you aren't familiar with it, you can actually see how it looks on the website. It is very easy to take. You simply, thank you. You simply go onto our site, go under our pledge, find the little heart, which she's going to do, and you take the pledge. The thing about taking a pledge is, what does that really mean in terms of the actions we take for the Mahoosuc Way? What is that representative of? So we saw some of it in the video, but it is these points of exploring wisely, honoring the land, cultivating community, being climate conscious. But even more, when you take the actual pledge, there is a place to write in what is your personal commitment. So in reviewing those, there are people who've said things like, I'm going to compost. I always wanted to compost. I'm actually going to compost now. And I know for a fact that they've started to compost. People eating locally. We have a huge local food movement here represented by all kinds of activities from Merrill's Bethel Food Sovereignty, Henry, I think, is on this call, Boondocks, the local food connection. So there are people who are actually digging even deeper into what does it mean to be mindful about the way that we do these things, exploring wisely, respect, cultivating community. I also, as you probably know, have a little business downtown which supports local artists. It's in the Filbert Place. So we have had the opportunity to talk with people about the pledge. Well, I should probably say, maybe I more accost people about the pledge. So, I mean, they would walk up at the art fair and I'd be like, hey, I need to talk to you about this. Mike Wilson at the Northern Farthest Center does an even better job than I do with that. So we've been at festivals, we've been at the businesses. The other great place to do this, to encourage people to take it, is out in the woods when you're on the resource. So I have talked to hunters and sledders, hikers, bikers, and then I come back home and I'll see that people have actually taken the pledge. So in terms of visitor and local and community and business involvement with the Mahoosuc Way, this is very much a first and critical step. And we will, along the way in our newsletter, share with you what people have said their actual steps would be, that thing that they were committing to. If you would like to have a pocket full of business, if there's a business card, pledge cards, they're at the chamber. You can go there and pick these up. I carry them in my pocket when I'm on the trail and in my ski jacket. So I really think it's really, really critically important. And I have to say that being part of this group that said we're not going to let a little thing like a global pandemic hold us down was an incredible experience. So I'm proud of all the work we've done to date. I hope more will join us. And I really hope we put the link in the chat for the pledge if we didn't already. And that if you haven't taken it, you will. And if you have taken it and you haven't encouraged all your friends to take it, that you'll do that. Much more to come with more engagement. And this is a really important thing, the Mahoosuc Way. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, the pledge, like Amy said, is kind of the core. It sets out all these various principles that we want to have upheld throughout our work. And yeah, it's kind of the gateway to everything else. So if you take the pledge on our website, you'll be on our mailing list and you'll start to hear about all the other things that are going on. So please take that pledge. And if you want to display the pledge on either your website or you have an office or wherever you need printed materials, come talk to me, Jesse, at the chamber, and I can get those right in your hands. Okay, next we will move along to Cora Saul, who will talk about some local workforce development initiatives with our local schools. Take it away, Cora.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk a bit today about workforce development and our work with the Telstar School District and how that work is supporting students in developing and then actualizing their post-secondary aspirations. Rural Aspirations is a really small nonprofit organization that essentially works to expand educational opportunities in rural Maine schools with a focus on connecting school and community so that students can see a future for themselves both within the community as well as outside of the community, but to have a really good understanding of how they can be problem solvers and activators in their own home places. So we work across the state, but we've had the pleasure of working in the Bethel region for the last 6 to 7 years. We primarily, I'm going to talk today about our work with Telstar High School, which is SAD 44, which is in the school, the public school in Bethel. We began working there in 2015 and 16 by supporting curriculum development with an innovative program they have called the Telstar Freshman Academy. And from there, our work transitioned to the high school to think about developing an advisory program to establish a connection between the students and their teachers around post-secondary aspirations. Like, how do you help students to develop their post-secondary aspirations. That program is called 7 Peaks, the 7 Peaks program, and that's a 6 through 12 program where students start in 6th grade by understanding who they are and how to use their voice and how to contribute, and then into the high school thinking about their options and where they're going and who they want to become. Students are getting out into the community doing job shadows and working on internships and work studies, so really working to expand the educational opportunities for students, and then ending in a capstone experience in the 12th grade where students talk about their journey as learners and where they're going after they get out of high school. That work started a conversation about how can we be more innovative in our core content, our core academic content. And so there was an opportunity through the Department of Education called Reimagining Responsive Educational Ventures, which was a grant that a team of teachers from Telstar went through a design process to develop an innovation. And what they realized was a lot of students in the sort of in the high school just didn't know what they wanted to do. They didn't know how to connect with the community. And so was there a way that they could teach English and science and social studies and math in a way that could get the kids out into the community? And so right now they're waiting to hear on a grant that the Reimagining Responsive Educational Ventures grant to develop the local ecology and aspirations pathway. And that pathway is really essentially asking, how can we develop an experiential pathway that connects our local economy, our environment and culture to challenges of the past, present, and future, that students understand how to contribute in real time as active citizens exploring their career paths of their choices. So finding a place for themselves. And so ultimately, the pathway is really designed to develop core academic skills while also guiding students to explore local career opportunities, connecting as change agents in the community, working on real challenges that are happening in the community, and then developing that collaborative mindset, that innovative mindset that they're going to need in whatever career they move on to as they go past high school and into their post-secondary ventures. I'm happy to share any additional information on that pathway. Again, it's all emerging, and one of the things that the Telstar School District has been really good at is looking at the community and looking at what's going on in the community and then adapting programming based on the direction that the community is going. Thank you.
Amazing work, and I really hope that these kids appreciate this someday, because this is such a cool community and they're so lucky to grow up here, and there's so many caring adults that are working hard to make sure that their education is unique and useful. So you're part of that. Thank you so much. I did see Vern Maxfield pop up. Hello, Vern. Vern is Mr. Regional Collaboration himself, and again has been part of our Mahoosuc process from the beginning. So I will turn it over to him to share just a few minutes about the regional collaboration efforts that he has been a part of, and I'll just let you take it away, Vern.
Thank you, Jesse. It's good to be here with everybody today. Like Jesse says, I am Vern Maxfield, Town Manager for Woodstock, Maine, the southern gateway to the Mahoosuc Way region, as I like to say. From my perspective, the Mahoosuc Way has been a positive way to bring our communities together. Early on, when we were discussing a community destination academy, we were discussing what a community destination academy could do to help us, and I wasn't sure. But I've seen it become a vehicle helping us to realize that we can work together for the good of our home area. And fortunately, the independent spirit is still strong, and we have put that strength to use in several ways in the past 2 years. Our community leaders, business people, and citizens are working closer together in several ways. Examples are that the 4 towns' boards of selectmen, along with the town managers, have met 3 times to interact, to discuss, and to look at the future, and talking current day things at the same time. This has given us a better sense of the surrounding town operations, needs, and strengths. Topics such as cooperative purchasing, solid waste, and affordable housing have been discussed. Also, we have been learning about broadband and its value to our area. With the 2020 shutdown, the internet became our connection to each other and to the world. Thanks to Mia Purcell, the broadband seed thought had been planted before the shutdown. Since then, the towns and townships and the county have worked together to find a way to make better coverage for all become a reality. At this time, we are looking at an RFP for internet service that will provide full coverage to our towns. The National Forest Center has also been instrumental in encouraging us to keep up the good work, supplying information, leadership, and experience. Also, the Bucks Ledge project has been aided greatly by the communities coming together around planning, fundraising for the purchase of these 640 acres in Woodstock, which will be preserved for public use forever. I also want to thank David Burrell for the enthusiastic way in which he first presented these ideas to us. His enthusiasm, encouragement, and belief that we could do this and help preserve our area in a way we want it to be challenged me to step up and be part of the Mahoosuc Way. I'm glad I did. I believe we all saw an opportunity to work together, and we are continuing to do just that. Let's keep going.
Thank you so much, Vern. Having you involved in this has been such a huge part of the process to get the town manager, select boards involved, and you really led by example there. And yeah, just another example of how diverse in terms of the types of businesses, organizations, municipalities, individuals involved in this whole process is really to be what it is. Thank you to all three of our speakers, and that's just three of our pillars. We also have a lot of work going on around environmental leadership as well as visitor experience. And yeah, there's always a ton going on in those departments. So none of these have real specific committees or anything like that, but it's just sort of a way of coalescing around this work and staying in touch and collaborating. And boy, the work we've seen come out of it and the relationships that are being developed are really inspirational. So next, we'll get into some guest speakers. We have two coming up here. The first is going to be Steve Lyons. Steve is the director of the Maine Office of Tourism, and Steve and his staff, and several have joined us today, thank you so much, have been active in bringing the original Community Destination Academy to Bethel after doing it in a couple other communities. We're super into making sure it was tailored to our experience and our assets here in the Bethel area, in the Mahoosuc area. So we're extremely grateful. And again, as several people have already said, very grateful that we got it off the ground just before the pandemic started, and it only became more relevant as we've seen over the past couple of years. So Steve and his staff have been participating and guiding us the whole way and have implemented their own campaign based on similar principles called Look Out for Me. So if we have time at the end of our two speakers, next up will be David Burrell. We may have time for questions, but we'll kind of see how that plays out. But anyway, I wanted to hand it over to Steve Lyons.
Great, thanks, Jesse. I think I'm muted now. Am I there?
We can
now?
hear you. We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, great. Do we have some slides there? I did send some slides along. Up there we go. Great. Well, as Jesse said, I'm Steve Lyons, director of the Maine Office of Tourism. Very pleased to be here. It's really inspiring, as she said, to see the work that's been done here. And it's also interesting to see how the work here aligns with where we plan to go at the Office of Tourism over the next few years. Historically, the Office of Tourism has focused its attention on advertising and marketing. And the theory was you advertise, you marketed, and people came to relax and fill the hotels and visit the attractions and that kind of thing. And that worked fine for a while. Next slide, please. However, the tourism landscape is changing. And so now we must look at things from a different perspective and looking at it from the destination management perspective. To that end, the Office of Tourism has hired a contractor to develop a statewide destination management plan with the goal of working towards destination stewardship that aligns with our need to balance tourism growth with residential quality of life and the inherent qualities that have always drawn people to Maine. And we're working with a company called the Coragio Group, which may not mean much to the folks in this room. I don't know how many people have heard of them, but certainly in the tourism space and destination management space and strategic planning space, they're a very well respected group. Next slide, please. It will include developing a visitor management strategy that does several things. One, provides a framework of key indicators for measuring and monitoring the impact of tourism. Two, it provides recommendations on how to enhance visitor management at the most visited sites and ways to direct visitors to similar and less used sites regionally. Three, it addresses locations that don't want or need promotion due to their current overuse, and it provides alternative activities. Four, it's going to recommend strategies to gradually decrease seasonality by expanding experiences into early spring and late fall and through the holiday season. And five, identify strategies to adapt to visitor and resident environmental and social impacts. Next slide, please. So let's look at each of these briefly. So rather than looking at how many more visitors we want at the destination, we may start considering different measures of success. It might be the number of quality jobs developed, stabilization of the population base, particularly in the rural areas, so we aren't losing residents, or how tourism is supporting our local farms, fishermen, and makers. Next slide, please. The seventh component is to enhance visitor management at the most visited sites. Places like Acadia National Park, the Maine State Parks, and Tumbledown Mountain are being heavily impacted. This plan should help us identify these areas of overuse and address these issues more directly. It may not be closing the places down. It might be strategies to increase visitation in off-peak seasons or encourage people to explore lesser traveled parts of the state. You probably already heard or probably already know that the Acadia National Park has started taking reservations for driving to the summit of Cadillac Mountain. This is great for places like Acadia National Park, and it works really well because they have staff to monitor it, but it'll be more difficult to manage random trailheads and wilderness hiking locations. So we'll be looking at the options, and this plan will help us sort of understand that a little bit more. Of course, overuse is also subjective. Communities with lots of visitors may not think that they're overcrowded. You go to a place like Bar Harbor or York, they might think they have just enough visitation. Also, visitors who are coming from urban areas may have a different opinion on what's crowded and what isn't. So a lot of our visitors are coming from the major metropolitans on the areas on the East Coast. So we'll be looking at all of this and see what they think crowding means. Next slide, please. We'll be addressing locations that don't want or need promotion due to current overuse. During the planning process, we intend to determine what places in the state are comfortable with the number of visitors that they are receiving and what places in the state want either more or fewer visitors. We may also learn that places don't necessarily need fewer visitors, they just need to find a way to better manage those. This leads to our next point, next slide please, which is to strategies to decrease seasonality. We hope to learn how we can decrease seasonality and spread people around the state based on available resources. As an example, this chart's a little difficult to read perhaps, but it shows cell phone arrivals in Oxford County versus Hancock County. And the blue you're going to see on this chart is actually Oxford County, and the orange is Hancock County. And what you'll see is that Oxford County is a little more fairly steady throughout the season for the most part. There's some ups and downs, whereas something like Hancock County, which is obviously home to Bar Harbor and Acadia National Park, really peaks out in midsummer. And so our goal here is to level out the bell curve for all regions of the state. Next slide, please. And another example of this is we've all probably heard about the Gardens Aglow event down in Booth Bay Harbor. That certainly has done wonders for expanding tourism in that area in the off-peak season. And there are other places such as Kennebunkport that do their Christmas Prelude, which has also been very successful at attracting visitors during the winter season. Next slide, please. Lastly, we want to identify the strategies to adapt to visitor and resident environmental and social impacts. One way to do this is to encourage people to participate in tourism-ready experiences. We've all seen the evidence and heard stories of what's been happening to our natural resources. People are leaving trash behind, damaging properties, getting into situations that they put themselves in situations that put themselves in danger because they're attempting to do things that they probably aren't prepared to do. They come up unprepared and maybe being out in the wilderness for the first time. One trend we're seeing in industry is that people are seeking travel with a purpose. So I think this will provide organizations around the state with the opportunity to develop volunteer tourism organizations or volunteerism organizations. As an example of this, the Maine Island Trail Cleanup Program offers people trips to the various islands to pick up garbage and do trail and campsite maintenance on the remote islands. This aligns very well with visitors who want to leave a place in better shape when they arrive, which goes along with traveling with a purpose. Also, by directing visitors to tourism-ready, guided, or curated experiences, people hosting these experiences will be able to manage the flow. That means if you're out with a guide or something, they can kind of manage the flow, which will hopefully limit the negative impacts, be it on our natural environment or at existing attractions. This might be taking a trip with a registered Maine guide who can teach about safety and stewardship, but it can also be playing a golf course that has extra capacity during a certain time of the year, or paddling an offshore island with an outfitter rather than trying to do it yourself, or maybe filling summer seats in a summer theater during the fall season. So it's a matter of spreading people out. An important social impact we must address is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tourism needs to be inclusive and not exclusive. So we'll be looking at how to attract a more diversified base while at the same time attracting people who value our natural resources, traditions, and the cultures as much as we do. Next slide, please. This slide, again, a little bit of an eye chart, but this slide demonstrates how much work we have ahead of us in this area. The country's population has changed, and if we don't adapt and start looking at how we attract today's diverse traveler, we'll have a difficult time competing with other destinations. In this case, if you can't read it very well, this is from our latest research, or our summer research from last year, that shows that the people that are visiting the state are 90% white. And then we have 2% Black, 1% Asian, 3% Hispanic, 2% Indigenous, and then 1% other. So obviously, as I said, we've got a long ways to go to really diversify the people that are visiting us. So also keep in mind that DEI isn't necessarily just about ethnicity and race. We also need to be thinking about things like travelers with disabilities and LGBTQ. Another project that's taking place simultaneously to this management plan that we're developing is our statewide tourism asset inventory. This project will assess readiness of businesses, experiences, events, and attractions around the state. And upon completion, we'll look at how the destination management plan can capitalize on these issues. So this will help us to identify experiences that are ready to go, those that maybe need a little bit of technical assistance to get to the next level, or new experiences that could be developed by entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. As we develop this destination management plan, we intend to make this as inclusive a process as possible by hosting input sessions that include talking with communities, tourism industry members, economic development organizations, residents, public officials, visitors, and whoever else is willing to listen. We expect to start these town hall visiting sessions this spring, so stay tuned for announcements because we'll encourage you all to participate in this process. Some of the sessions will be in person and some will be virtual. In addition to these public input sessions, Coraggio Group will be looking at research from the Office of Tourism and other third-party data to see how Maine can better align with the new tourism trends while maintaining sustainable growth. You could look at this, what's interesting about this, you could look at it almost as though this is taking the Community Destination Academy that you all went through and deploying it kind of on a statewide scale. Our goal is to develop a plan that is sensitive to the long-term sustainability of the state and not solely dependent on high volume growth of visitation. So in closing, marketing isn't going away. It simply becomes another element in managing the destination for the betterment of the residents of Maine. Ultimately, we'd like this plan to celebrate the qualities that make Maine special, such as shops featuring Maine artisans, restaurants serving locally grown and produced foods, natural resources that attract people to the state, and cultural experiences that show the whole world who we really are here in Maine. We hope that the plan that's developed will provide all Mainers with a blueprint for how to understand and address the needs of future visitors to the state. And we also hope that all of you will be part of this planning process. And as I said, you'll be hearing more about this in the not too distant future. Next slide is just thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Steve. Again, if we were in a big room, I'm sure we'd all be giving you a big round of applause. Thank you for sharing that. It makes our job a lot easier knowing that we're doing it in tandem and with what the state initiatives are, because it seems silly that to be working against each other. It's definitely better to be working towards the similar goals. And I'm often in touch with other chamber directors throughout the state of Maine, and definitely they've seen these similar pressures that we are experiencing. So I think it's great to be able to grow together. So thank you so much for having the time today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Thanks.
Sure thing. Again, speaking of time, we will move right into our next speaker, which is David Burrell. David Burrell is the CEO of Future IQ, which works all over the world on community development and sustainable tourism and planning initiatives. And David has been with us since the very beginning and well before with other communities, keeping us informed about our place in the national and worldwide trends. He has brought a wealth of expertise to the process, and we're extremely grateful to have had his guidance. And okay, with that, I'll say, take it away, David.
Thank you, Jesse. Hello, everybody. Great to be back with you, right? And for those who I haven't met, really nice to be with you. It's really interesting. I really enjoyed Steve's presentation. And one of the things that Steve sort of ended with there was he was talking about how the planning at the state level is really like taking the Community Destination Academy that you participated in the Bethel area and sort of taking that to a state level. Actually, I want to really talk about how that is really happening at a national and a global level. And it's really fascinating to me that, you know, the Mahoosuc Way and the work that was done with the Sustainable Tourism Plan that really started 2.5 years ago, and you know, today's the second anniversary of the Community Summit, it really is so far ahead, right? And the world's catching up. So I want to just go through some kind of high-level things that are going on, just to give you a sort of a sense of where the work you've been doing fits into what I think is absolutely a transformational set of macro trends. So next slide, please. And so, some of the things I'm going to talk about is how language is changing around tourism. So, you know, one of the things we talked a lot about in the sustainable tourism planning there was about this notion of seeking balance, right? So people understand that tourism is really important for local, rural and regional economies that have an exposure to recreation economy and so on. And that's the sort of the industry value part, you know, it's built on the assets that you have. But there's often comes with it this challenge of managing potentially negative impacts that might occur in the industry. And that can be, you know, impacting people's quality of life and so on, right? And this whole notion of balance, I think, is really the conversation that has been amplified in the last 2 years. And I think the pandemic's been a big trigger to that. Next slide, please. So one of the things I've noticed is that, you know, the pandemic and all the things that have come with it have just triggered this most remarkable global and national dialogue about the reinvention of tourism. And I think it gave everybody a chance to pause just for long enough to say, are we really headed the direction we want, right? And you can watch this across the world, whether it's in Japan or South America or Europe, you know, everywhere that has a tourism exposure, people are really trying to understand what do they want tourism to look like on the other side of a pandemic. It's given breathing space for destinations to kind of feel like they've reclaimed their home. It's given a chance for people to think about, you know, the type of tourism and how they sort of fit into that. And I think it's leading to a couple of really macro trends that I want to talk about. So first of all, there's this a huge pivot that's underway. And I want to emphasize the word big and huge, right? Because I think the danger is that, like, this is just like at a collective level, is that we underestimate the significance of what's going on right now. And that big pivot is from marketing to destination impact and destination management. And Steve hit right on that. He said that, several years ago, it was all about marketing and it was, numbers of visitors and so on. Today, it's all about how do you manage impact. But that's not just happening in the Mahoosuc Way. It's not just happening in Maine. That's happening nationally and it's happening globally. And it's going to have all sorts of impact on state agencies and chambers of commerce. It's cascading down into, metrics. How do people measure success, as Steve mentioned? Legislation starting to change in terms of where it directs transient lodging tax and so on, because that traditionally, was largely mandated to go back into marketing and promotion and so on. But that's a really massive and fundamental shift, right? And it's going to change the world for, I think, for the better, for a lot of smaller communities that can be really impacted by tourism, but it's also going to change the whole travel industry. The other big sort of theme that's really accelerated is this discussion about stewardship and sustainability. And those words are somewhat interchangeable, but if you look at, even in the last 12 months, I guess, you've seen major iconic resorts or destinations in the US. So, for example, Vail, Lake Tahoe, Jackson Hole, a lot of mountain communities have launched stewardship, destination stewardship planning. There's a lot of talk, obviously, about sustainability in New England and on the Oregon coast and elsewhere. So this has really become front and center. So people are really now concerned when they think about tourism economy, about how we build in stewardship and sustainability. My point of saying all of this is the stuff you guys were dealing with 2 years ago, right? So you're really ahead of the curve. And I also want to point out, as I sort of get through this, is that other people are watching, right? And are looking to the work you've done as a little bit of a roadmap for their own activities. And as Steve hit on too, there's a lot more broader considerations that are now emerging in tourism. So, inclusive community-based visioning processes. Really, I'm trying to understand total impact as opposed to just the traditional metrics of, revenue and so on. The whole diversity, inclusivity, equity, cultural sensitivity, and so on. All of those things are becoming really forefront. So destinations are having to figure that one out. So next slide, please. And just to give you an example of this too, so ITB, if you haven't heard of that, it's the world's largest travel trade show, and their sort of iconic event is in Berlin, right? So I'll be speaking to this group in March. So that's their gathering, and I'm sort of doing a presentation with the regional director of the Eventual Travel Trade Association for Europe and Central Asia. And my point of showing this is that the industry at that bigger level of the trade is really trying to figure out this whole issue about sustainability, about impact on communities. So you can see here in their corporate social responsibility, they talk about the need to create better places to live in order to invite people to visit. So there's this profound shift going on, and they're trying to figure it out. And quite frankly, big groups like the Venture Travel Trade Association, ITB, they're trying really hard, right? And they're some of the groups that are looking to and trying to connect with communities like the Mahoosuc Way to figure out, what do they need to be taking account of, and how do they design tourism from their side to make it work for communities like yours. Next slide. The thing that I actually think is most exciting in all this, right, of what I've seen come out in the last couple of years, what's changing, is it's what I call is the toolbox is expanding. So when we were doing the planning for the Mahoosuc Way Sustainable Tourism Plan, so 2 years ago, one of the things I was saying when we were in the Bethel Inn, in that room at the end of the hall there, I was talking about that at that stage, the US didn't really have the toolbox to be able to manage visitation and sustainable tourism in the way that you really would need to. And one of the things that I've been really excited about is to see the toolbox starting to expand. And the first point there is that there's now an emerging willingness to control impact. So if you go back 2 or 3 years ago, people generally weren't that willing to put in place control measures to really draw a line and sort of manage visitation by a set of rules, essentially, or control systems. It was seen as a little bit kind of counterculture, I guess, right? But today, a lot more destinations are. In fact, we were just working in Gorham, so over the border. And they are very clearly leaning into putting in place measures to control capacity and manage the separation from things like motorised and non-motorised tourism. And a lot of what I'm seeing is people are really trying to figure out how do we protect the resident experience and quality of life while we have a visitation economy. And that I think is a sea change. It's a willingness at the level of leadership in society, at the level of communities, to think about control, think about the willingness to embrace that. And that's going to cascade down into a whole range of tools that communities can have. The other part too is there's a lot more focus and willingness to talk about protection of key areas. And so in other words, doing things like keeping things off the map, areas that locals may know about that are particularly important, but are particularly vulnerable to overuse, taking those off the map. And also people figuring out how to boost local benefit, how to put more money in the pockets of the local community and do that in a sustainable way and over a longer term period. And then the other part too is a much more aggressive direct messaging with visitors. And of course, I mean, you guys, I'm talking to you, you're ahead of the curve, right? You've had the Mahoosuc Way Pledge, which is really very much about educating visitors. But the other part too is about laying down expectations. So I think what we're going to see coming out of the pandemic is a much greater willingness for destinations to be laying down expectations of what they expect from visitors. So next one. And this is the piece that I'm perhaps not quite so sure or optimistic about, which is how or will visitors change, right? So as we emerge and we see things ramping back up again, and we start to see this kind of heightened awareness about sustainability and stewardship at a local level, will there be a new sensitivity or sensibility with travellers or with visitors? I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure some will. I think some people are still cranky and kind of want their way. But that's something that's going to have to kind of move, I think, to make the whole story about sustainable tourism work. And that sort of cascades into, visitors considering their impact and being willing to moderate their behaviour, sort of moving out from that sort of I'll do what I want when I want to fitting in with the local system, and fitting in with the local expectations. And then I think that relationship between the visitor and the destination, and again, the Mahoosuc Way is right at the very forefront of that and is really providing, I think, a great role model. That's all about engaging visitors to be part of the solution. And if you look at the subtext of what's created in the Mahoosuc Way, it really is inviting people to very much do their part and be part of a solution. And I think that's part of what people particularly are looking at in terms of this as a case study. And just my final comment, and then I'll hand it back to you, Jesse, is that, people are taking notice and are watching what is happening with the Mahoosuc Way and in your region, and everywhere from very locally. So as I said, we've been doing some work in Gorham with the Northern Forest Centre, and they very much, what are they, 30 miles away, they're very much looking at the Mahoosuc Way Pledge and what's happening there, but it goes much further afield than that. So I've been working with a group that's sort of right on the edge of Lake Tahoe in California. And they were telling me about, they have their list of, the top sort of 4 or 5 plans that they've seen from across the US. And guess what, right? The Mahoosuc Way Sustainable Tourism Plan is in their list of the plans that they see as most relevant and really right on the cutting edge. So what I wanted to leave you with is that, what seems like really normal conversations that we're having now and the sort of storylines, these were very much at the forefront and are still ahead of the curve. So you're a couple of years into this sort of process, the Maine Office of Tourism sort of picking this up and applying it at state level. But I did want to just share that because I think everybody should be extremely proud of the work that was done. And of course, you can't rest on your successes, right, and have to keep pushing ahead. But I do think if there's a measure of success, is that the country and the world is catching up to the work that was really laid down, 2 years ago in the Mahoosuc Sustainable Tourism Plan. This whole notion of a pivot to destination impact management, the whole notion of building a new relationship with the visitor and so on. So just a few thoughts from my observations. So Jesse, can I hand that back to you, please?
Yes, thank you, David. I'll give you your round of applause as well. I, again, really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, because I know you work all over the place. What a lot of pressure, but also really flattering, and also, a nice reminder to everybody here that, we really are ahead of that curve, and other people are looking to us. And so I think that's just what we need to generate the momentum to keep working and moving forward. So thank you so much for that perspective, David, and to Steve too. To see, the more I reflect on this, the more we can do anything we want, as a community, right? But it'll be much more effective if other neighbors and even industry-wide gets on board with the similar concepts. Of course, using their own community's input so that each community has its own flavor of this. But thank you so much again. Next, we really should move into our breakout groups. Amy Scott, would you like to tell us how that's going to work?
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jesse, and thanks to our speakers. Much appreciated. And I am really happy that all of you are here, and am excited to transition to a moment when you will actually get a chance to talk to each other. So we are going to put you all into breakout groups and give you a question or two to discuss, and hopefully give each person a chance in the breakout groups, even though they'll be relatively short, a chance to talk with each other. So what we really want to know, and what we hope you'll share with each other, is what in regards to implementing these pillars, what are you really excited to see happen? And just as a reminder, the pillar work is organized around community engagement, regional collaboration, workforce housing, workforce development, environmental leadership, and visitor experience. So that's really what has set the foundation for the Mahoosuc Way. And we've shared a bit about what's happening in each of those pillars, and the report shared a little bit more, the report that hopefully you all received in advance. So just take a few minutes and talk about what are you excited to see happen next in regard to those pillars. So in a moment, you will all be swept off into breakout rooms, and you will have a breakout leader, and that person will help facilitate the conversation. And we will be looking for one person, either the leader or someone else in the group, to be ready to share when we come back as a full group. So we'll have a quick round of some report outs on the highlights of what you discussed. So we'll be in our breakout rooms for 10 minutes, and you'll automatically be brought in to your room and brought back to the full group. So we'll transition from there.
You'll go straight there. So assuming this works when I hit click.
Thanks, Maura.
It worked. Oops.
I think we got sent back to the main room. Amy, is that you, Jay?
We
Yeah,
are.
I think we're all here.
I think we're all back in the room. I think we're all back. Yeah. Goes by so quick. Having conversations. I'm sorry for everyone who was in the middle of their conversations, but I hope that it was helpful to have a chance to talk to each other in small groups like that. So what I'd like to do is ask the leaders of each of the groups to take a moment and share back with us what you talked about. What did you hear? Is anyone willing to go first?
See Robin.
Go for it, Robin.
So we had a great small group, Anna Cisco, who's a business owner, Carrie Quiche, who's a friend of the Bethel area and is a journalist and a writer of travel guides, Arnie Jordan, who's a selectman or has been a selectman in the town of Greenwood, and Alex Ramey, who was a consultant, a fellow or with the Northern Forest Center. And each one of them brought a slightly different perspective, but I think the common theme is how important this work is and how each of the individuals plan to incorporate this with what they do in our communities. And Carrie talked a little bit about making sure to share some of these principles in his guides. And as he's traveling around the state, there are other communities, as was mentioned before, who are aspiring to have their own pledge or do something that is similar to the Mahoosuc Way. And so just super excited about this group and their contributions.
Thank you, Robin. That's great. Mia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, we had a great group. Interesting combination of folks. Hannah Collins from the Maine Office of Tourism, Alan Connors from the Bethel Inn, Beth Allen, who is a new resident in Bethel, and Kelsey, who's with the Northern Forest Center. All of us talked, and community engagement was one focus of Beth's in particular as a new resident in the area. And following along with that, Kelsey mentioned that what happens after you take the pledge? How can you make taking the pledge more meaningful by taking a particular action within the community and really feeling more connected to the community? And Alan mentioned wayfinding and how important that is for really helping both residents as well as visitors really find their way around here and feel connected and like they're getting a full experience while they're being here. And last but not least, workforce development was mentioned, and appreciation for the work that Cora is doing within the school district, but also that there is less of a division between the wood products industry, which has been here in the past, and more of a blending of the businesses that currently exist here with the visitors that are coming here. And the fact that we have more remote workers coming here as well.
Great, thank you, Mia. David, want to go next?
Yeah, so just quickly, Amy, so we had Gabe Perkins, who seems to be involved in everything, Tao Smith from the Gould Academy, and Nancy Marshall, who's with her PR firm out of Portland. So we got pretty deep, pretty fast actually in this conversation. So there was two things we identified as would be exciting to happen next, right? One would be the workforce housing issue, right? And being able to crack the nut on that. And we talked about that really everywhere across the country and rural and regional areas, people are trying to figure that out. But there's not yet the really great model for how do you kind of solve the housing issue. Lots of kind of ideas, but if you could use the leadership and the sort of coalitions that are being built to be able to make real headway on that, that would be both a remarkable contribution to the location, but also as an example of a lot of other places, right? And then that led really quickly actually into talking about the whole issue of the health and sustainability of the communities, that communities really, like the ones in your area, are really sort of stressed at the moment, where it's, there's people, businesses can't stay open because they can't get workers, there's, people are falling through the cracks and so on. So this notion of thinking about how do you turn the success of tourism and really help it sort of sustain and shore up communities to be able to build long-term community success so that people can thrive and survive in a location that is really built on a visitation economy. People come there because it's so fantastic. Make sure the locals really have a fantastic experience as well. Amy.
Yeah, thank you, David. That's great. How about Amy Halstead? Do you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go. We had a great group, which was an interesting group in that we had someone new, relatively new to the area. And we had Carol Ann on with us, which was great because we had the state and outdoor recreation perspective. We have someone who splits their time between here and the seacoast. And then we had a person on our call, Francis, who's a 35-year homeowner up here, but from Cape Elizabeth. So what emerged from our group was the sense of place and how important the sense of place is. And first of all, not resting on our laurels. Thank you very much on the work that we've done to date, the 2 years. Like, it's really time to dig further in. But Sally commented on what she experienced looking at social media this weekend with all of the pictures of all of the lines of traffic headed for Sunday River. And that brought up a couple of things. One is, how do we get to those visitors to get them engaged and have them help contribute to whatever the expectations are that we set. And the other really neat thing that evolved from our group was that everyone was listening very deeply to each other. So different experiences, but the sense of place, I would say, was the thing that emerged in the forefront, and taking care of it. Jay said we need to take care of where we are. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Let's see, Jesse, do you want to go next? Oh.
Yeah, let's see. We started with housing, and Bonnie brought that up. Our group was Bonnie Pooley, Henrietta Litz, Brooks Morton, and Steve Lyons, and myself. Yeah, housing is something that I'm pretty passionate about. Many of you have listened to my tirades about it, and I'm trying to attract any interest that we can to this community in terms of making sure that we know the resources are out there, like it's coming from somewhere, but we need to have a local coalition and expertise to take advantage of that. And I'm much more concerned about the lack of labor than I am about the lack of funds. So anyway, that's my brief spiel. Transportation, of course, goes hand in hand with that. And Henrietta also brought up, she lives in Hanover, and so maybe it's time to engage some of these other additional smaller towns that are part of our group. Of course, we're all small towns, but our core group of municipalities that have been involved has been Bethel, Greenwood, Newry, and Woodstock. But maybe it is time to go another ring and do the Hanovers and the Gileads and in our area, because we know that that's four of many communities that really are part of our, let's say, service center and are affected by this economy. And lastly, one concern is, yes, we know we've all sort of experienced, we all have new neighbors that have moved here over the course of the pandemic, and the Mahoosuc Way concepts are a great way of helping people integrate and help get to know their community. And actually it's great to be able to say, hey, this is what this place is all about, and have that sort of those like go-to materials to integrate people. You know, we've been living through a time when it's been kind of awkward and sometimes inappropriate to have big events. So that's something that this community is so good at, throwing these great events. But maybe there will be a time to say, hey, new people, come on out and make this sort of a core part of the messaging for that. That's just an idea. But yeah, there's a lot of new people around. They need to get to know their community, but once they settle in, these are good tools to help them do that. So I'll hand it back.
Thank you, Jesse. Mike, you want to jump in next?
Sure. So we also had a good group like everyone. Our group was myself, Steve White, Jane Chandler, Cora Saul, and Carolyn Castaldo. And as other groups, one of the pieces we really talked about was the workforce and housing question, and recognizing those two things as being tied very close together. And I think someone else used the word tough nut to crack. I think we all recognize that, but I think there's a sense that this issue is pressing enough that we're just going to have to figure out how to crack that nut. And again, looking around the folks who are engaged here right now or around the edges or want to be, I think there's a lot of potential there. But again, it will take some time. It's not going to be a quick fix, but that I think is consistently burning as a high pressure issue for people across the board. It was interesting. I thought a really interesting point also around the seasonality of the industry, even though, again, looking at Steve's slide, it's less seasonal here than it is in some places, but folks who are involved with even food pantries and all recognizing that when you hit those shoulder seasons, there's a lot more demand because people just simply, they run out of work in those shoulder periods of time, and it puts more pressure on them. They just simply don't have the income. So continuing to think about how to build out and increase the year-round nature and flatten those ebbs and flows that Steve showed in his slide. I thought really good point around, again, continuing to work through the schools with kids in the area to, of course, it helped them imagine a future for themselves in this place that they love. And starting early in that and really engaging them to be active problem solvers and to be thinking about ways and opportunities and to be entrepreneurial and think about how to work with the economy that we have in this region to make good lives for themselves. Another, again, good point on the regional collaboration, just continuing to feed some of the progress that we've seen over the last couple of years as an opportunity just to be more efficient and bring scale and efficiency to work across the region. And then the last piece, I think, is just really thinking about continuing to feed this kind of interplay between visitors and residents and thinking about them as a community and looking for those opportunities to more constructively engage visitors to be involved in work to support the place, not to just be coming in and out, but to really be thinking about opportunities to contribute to local groups, to be involved with work, to help support trail building, whatever it is, but really continue to feed that, the constructive dynamic and relationship between visitors and residents in the area.
Super. Thanks, Mike. Vern, how about you?
Yes, we had a group of Lori Swain, Julie Raft, Lee Dazzler, Shelley Bowen, and myself, and we just had a conversation, basically. I didn't take a lot of notes, but there was mention of the traffic jam that would happen in Bethel, I guess, over the weekend that I missed out on. But how are we going to deal with that if it continues? One person said that looking in from the outside, it feels a bit exclusive and they'd love to see the program expand. They like the idea of it going statewide, but we also realize that we have to keep our own areas and maybe have a chain of connection through the other groups in the state. Felt that it was a great local idea, and one really didn't understand the pledge in detail. So I think we'll get back to her. And they like the idea that it's becoming a good visit. They want it to stay a good visitor experience. And that we got to be careful that we keep ownership of it in the local hands so that the local residents feel an ownership of the program in the area.
Great. Thank you, Vern. Barbara Barrett.
Hi, thanks. Of course, a great group. My group included 2 people from Gorham, which was great, Meg Poirier and Bob Holdsworth. Meg has actually been working with a similar community destination academy with David, and Bob works with, and I hope I got this right, the Cross New Hampshire Adventure Trails. So has knowledge of and works with inland woods and trails here. And then we had Isabella from the Northern Forest Center and Emily Ecker and Marcel Pollock. And some of the highlights of our conversation sounds like concurrent themes. One being, of course, you can probably guess, housing and sort of what it is that we're doing, if any action has been taken thus far since, the original CDA. And a concern that the uptick in Airbnb is actually taking away from the available housing in our areas, and that there are so many houses that are being purchased but aren't going to people who are actually living here as residents. So that sort of resonates with me as an Airbnb user, but also looking and seeing just how many Airbnbs there are popping up here as well. Another one, an exciting part that was shared is the whole idea of regional collaboration and how we've all been coming together over the past 2 years, and how we can continue to do that, and really addressing things like climate resiliency and how the towns really should be taking the lead. And the biggest thing that we can do with environmental leadership is to model the behavior that we wish to see in our visitors, of course. Some simple and tangible things would be organizing things like trash pickups and, making visible actions that other people can see happening in the area. Having EV chargers, which I think we've done pretty well here in our town, and continuing the trend in other places across the region. Let's see, I think that is the gist of mine. And just, again, the idea of sharing ideas across communities and regions. And I think that would kind of go along with what we just heard about how that this sometimes may feel exclusive, and that, we're stronger as our region is bigger. So that sums it up.
Thank you, Barbara. Great.
You're welcome.
Well, mine was the last group, and we had actually 2 staff from the Office of Tourism, Jennifer Geiger and Donna Moreland. We had Sue Dunn, who's having a little technical trouble and mostly had to listen. We had Denise Valley, town manager of Gorham, and also Barbara Murphy from Mahoosuc Land Trust. And the themes that emerged from our discussion were that it's really fantastic that the Mahoosuc Way and the pledge have been put together in a way that are accessible for people to get involved with them. And also from a state perspective, that there's a hopefulness around the customer experience, and around being able to create something that will help visitors be the kinds of visitors who are going to travel responsibly, and actually provide the tools for them to do that. And that's the key. I think there's a lot of people who have all kinds of intentions of, wanting to be responsible travelers, but how do you actually do that? And the Mahoosuc Way is really beginning to provide that information. And so there's a lot of opportunity to build on there. So with that, we're going to go over just by a minute or so, and I want to turn it back to Barbara to close us out. And just if you can hang on for another minute, that would be great. Thank you.
Hang on, because the best is yet to come, right? The ending is quite sweet. But before we get to that, I just want to thank everyone for participating today. this is the culmination of a lot of work over the past 2 years with a lot of really great people who have stepped up to make this process and the Sustainable Tourism Committee happen, and to be a part of the Mahoosuc Way. So I want to thank all of you for also tuning in, and by doing so, also being a part of this new initiative. And so welcome to the Mahoosuc Way. Thank you for being here. We're going to send out a survey to everyone. We hope that you can take that. Let us know your thoughts. There's going to be a recording of this video, and please feel free to share that for other people, especially because of the video in the beginning. We want to get that out far and wide so people can see some of the work that we've been doing, and also start embracing this thing that we're trying to do to strengthen our community, which is strengthened by your contributions to this. So I really appreciate you being here, and from all of us, thanks for spending an hour and a half on Monday evening to celebrate the second year of the CDA that started this all out. And saving the sweetest part for last, locally known and globally listened to and loved, Richard Blanco is going to read a poem to end our session here tonight. So thank you, and let's all listen to Richard.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Blanco, 2013 Presidential Inaugural Poet. It's my honor and pleasure to support the important work you're all doing by sharing this poem with you. It takes its inspiration from nature, more specifically clouds, thinking about clouds as a metaphor for how we can coexist. Cloud Anthem. Until we are clouds that tear like bread but mend like bones, until we weave each other like silk sheets shrouding mountains, or bear the gales that shear us, until we soften our hard edges, free to become any shape we imagine, a rose or an angel crafted like paper mache by breezes, or a lion or dragon like marble chiseled by gusts, until we scatter ourselves into pebbles of gray puffs, then band together like stringed pearls, until we learn to listen to each other, as thunderous as opera or as soft as a showered lullaby, until we truly treasure the sunset, lavish it in mauve, rust, and rose, until we have the courage to vanish like sails into the horizon, or be at peace, anchored still, until we move without any measure, as vast as continents or as petite as islands, floating in an abyss of virtual blue we all belong to, until we dance tango with the moon and comfort the jealous stars falling, until we care enough for the earth to bless it as morning fog, until we realize we're as muddy as puddles, as pristine as lakes, not yet clouds, until we remember we're born from rivers and dewdrops, until we are at ease to dissolve as wispy showers, not always needing to clash like godly yells of thunder, until we believe lightning isn't our right to the ground. Though we can collude into storms that ravage, we can also sprinkle ourselves like memories, until we tame the riot of our tornadoes, settle down into a soft drizzle, into a daydream. Though we may curse with hail, we can absolve with snowflakes. We can die valiant as rainbows and hold light like blood in our lucid bodies. We can decide to move boundlessly, without creed or desire, until we are clouds, meshed within clouds, sharing a kingdom with no king, a city with no walls, a country with no name, a nation without any border or claim, until we abide as one, together in one single sky. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And the last thing I'd like to say is don't forget to take the pledge, share it, know it, and embrace it. Thank you for being here.